What happens when they're not happy with the appraised value? What are the options a property owner has when they feel that the value is just not there for them? What's their steps?
Step one is get your own appraisal. And then be honest with yourself. Is that appraisal accurate or not? I do encourage people to consult an attorney.
There's a few things that can be done early on to smooth the process. Do you have some tips, some suggestions for the engineering world, the professionals out there, as to what can make your life easier?
Finding out where utilities are early on is really helpful. Title reports, we obtain those generally early on in the process, and reviewing them to find out what recorded rights are there. That in-person contact to give an offer is very important.
It's a human connection.
Be willing to talk to the person that knocks on your door. And if for some reason you don't get along with that person, ask to speak to somebody else. The property owner has the right to negotiate. They have the right to obtain their own appraisal, and they have the right to receive compensation for their own appraisal. There is absolutely nothing about this process that we want to just push you to the side and take your land.
Miss Grava, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that you accepted this invitation. I know it's not easy to come in and talk about things, but you are going to be fantastic. And this is such an important topic. It is a topic that we get a lot of questions about. And, one of the things we've been doing this year is that we've been having guests talk about the engineering. We've had guests talk about the environmental, all those exciting topics like traffic,
Yes,
right?
there's lots of topics with this infrastructure.
Yeah. And so we really need to talk about real estate,
Okay.
right-of-way acquisition, right? And you are the, let's say, real estate program manager
Correct.
at the City of Elk Grove.
Correct.
Tell me about what it is you do, and tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you, Derek, for having me. This is an experience. I'm not used to being a center of attention such as this, but I'm happy to do it.
Thank you.
So for the City of Elk Grove, I started with the City of Elk Grove as a consultant. I was with Interwest Consulting Company, and I was hired then to essentially be staff for the City of Elk Grove, because City of Elk Grove was a consultant model city. And so I worked with Public Works to acquire necessary property rights for public improvement projects. This project was actually on the back of my wall when I first got to the city in 2014.
Oh my gosh.
So the JPA Connector project has been here a really long time, and we're making progress, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
We are actually progressing now. But I had a strip map when I first got here. My boss at the time, Julie Klein, who was a great right-of-way person, she rolled this project out and says, "Look what we'll be doing. Look at this exciting new roadway that we'll be."
Thank you, Julie. Yes.
So that's what when I hired in with the city, we're there to help acquire property rights. I was a little nervous about that. I'd never done property rights before. I had a real estate license years ago for mortgages. Quit that. Didn't like that. About 2005, said never again. Staying out of the real estate business, not for me. I'm a very customer-oriented person.
Yes.
So I really wanted to, that's who I like the customer. I like to talk to people, to do that.
Yeah.
Hence, meeting Julie, having her hire me to do this, she assured me that it is a very open process.
Mhm.
And her way of doing right away is to get the property owner to trust, build that relationship, have them understand the project and what the public's doing.
Sure.
So that's really what we worked on. And as I continue my right-of-way journey with the city and everything, that's really what I do. I work with the public for projects, acquiring any necessary rights. They can be easements.
Mm-hmm.
We can acquire property in fee. We can acquire just a little sliver of property or the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's meaning we have to relocate people businesses, um, which is never easy,
Yeah.
but it is a process that we do. And so it's exciting.
And you do a great job.
Thank you.
You do a great job. And shout out to Julie.
Yeah.
She is fantastic.
And
And
she is who I learned through, you take a few courses on how to do it, but really it's the
yeah,
customer contact and being compassionate.
right. Oh, that's a great story. And it's the right approach. It really is. I feel strongly that the trust with the owner is and so important.
It
And
is. We're not there to make life miserable for the person. It may be uncomfortable and it may be miserable, but that's not what we're really trying to do.
sure.
We want to help them through that process. We want to explain their rights, and they have a lot of rights.
Oh, absolutely.
This isn't something where in the old days, think about when the government just gave people land for the railroad and no compensation. They just took it.
Mhm.
That's not the way right away works today.
Sure.
There's a process. There's a way to do it, and a way to do it that
There's
you
the
know
right way
there's
to
the right
acquire.
way.
There's a
Yes,
right way to acquire right of
correct.
way. um, you know, I I find myself sometimes having to explain the term right of way,
Yes.
right? And because I like to say it's a property, real estate. I think people understand that kind of stuff. But so we're building something that the public eventually will have the rights to use, right? How did you describe the term right of way?
It's tricky.
Uh-huh.
So there are what's called a right-of-way deed. A right-of-way deed grants certain rights. There's bundles of rights, and you can have an easement, and you can own the property in what's called fee simple.
Hmm.
Um, and right-of-way can be both. It can be an easement, and it can be in fee simple. Typically, you consider land rights, a bundle of rights. You could have 100 sticks. And if you have a right of way easement, the governing agency who holds that right of way easement has about 99 of those sticks. You, as the property owner, have about one stick left.
Hmm.
In a fee simple process, we own all 100 sticks.
Right.
Um, so it can be both way. And right of way is generally granted for roadway infrastructure. What is roadway infrastructure? It's the road, it's the supporting drainage, it could be ditches, it could be storm drains. You could have other utilities that the city or the county grants rights to put in the roadway, such as pipelines and other things can all go in a road right away
Hmm.
under permits and everything else.
Fantastic. Yeah, I always think of like a freeway is that
Mhm.
fee simple, right?
Generally, the state of California does not want anything other than fee
Mhm.
simple for their freeway.
Right. Absolute, right? And then
Right.
they
Absolute ownership.
restrict access.
Yes, they do. They
Right.
restrict access. That's generally one of those property rights that
Hmm.
one of those bundles of 99 at 100 sticks that people generally have a right to cross into public right of way. So in a freeway, those are restricted.
Right. No
Maybe the
drive.
JPA connector, we restrict those rights to only certain
Yep.
locations. And
Yeah.
so that's an access right that's taken,
I've heard it as
compensated for, but taken.
sure, and I've heard it as ingress and egress,
Hmm.
right? Uh,
In and out.
Perfect. Okay, so let's see if we can get into it here. Um, we're trying to build a public project, to build a road.
Yep.
Somebody's got property out there. Kind of, I know it's a long process, but kind of step the audience through, some of those initial steps and kind of walk us through what the right of way acquisition process would look like.
It starts, well, I have been involved, and I think the city of Elk Grove has done a really good job keeping right away involved early on. Um, And so they involve right-of-way from the initial design meetings.
Hmm.
So I think it's important for your right-of-way or your engineering team to be aware of right-of-way to help along so that the process starts in the beginning with design. Engineers love to put lines down on paper and say, this is where the road's going to go.
Yes, we do.
Um, but they might not have seen that they put it right over the top of, I don't know, the well for some agricultural property. And if you if you move the road 20 feet, you might miss that well. And that well could cost
Yep.
$100,000. So starting in the initial with a right-of-way person to help guide through, you can just help identify some of the things that engineers tend to oversee.
And it's more efficient, right?
Yeah, sometimes. Some people will say, "And you're slowing down the process. Quit asking those questions."
What? Come on.
No, we're not going to move it. But I mean, it is a process.
Sure.
So it starts there, and then we actually had to start building relationships with the property owners that could be impacted. We don't know for sure they're going to be impacted, but they could be impacted by the project early on because we have an environmental process. You have right-of-way surveys or surveys. You have utility surveys. There's all sorts of things that have to be done first. So we start building relationships because we have to contact that property owner to get access to their property. We want to do these surveys. We need to walk on your property, and we would like permission to do that.
Permission, right?
So we're asking permission to get on people's property, and so that starts the process of, oh, there's an infrastructure project. Well, when's it going to happen? They want a lot of answers right now, in the very beginning, which we can't give.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, projects
Years.
can last years.
Yes, they can.
Like I said, in 2014, when I started with the city, we were working on the Kammerer extensions, which is part of the JPA. And we were contacting property owners back then for environmental surveys and everything else.
Yeah.
And so it starts years before a project is ever environmentally approved and gets funding for right-of-way construction and everything else. So we start there. So we start building relationships and we move forward. Your question was actually about what's the process. So that's the first. Permission to enter.
step.
That's really the first step.
Hello, we're here. Knock, knock,
Yeah.
knock. Yeah.
Do that. And then after we have design, I like to say we need 65% design, but that's my desire because generally with 65% plans, you have a pretty strong design at that point.
You're going from something drawn with like a thick crayon to a sharp pencil, right?
Correct. There's still refinement.
Yeah, you've
better.
done enough work that
Mhm.
you feel relatively confident that this is the footprint.
Right. And so at 65% design, we start saying, okay, it's probably time to appraise. We have maybe some funding where we can buy some property now. And so we send out what's called a notice of decision to appraise. I never blind send that notice. I always recommend that you contact that property owner first. You tell them what's happening. You tell them what's coming. You send out a notice of decision to appraise. Then the appraiser contacts them. The appraiser sets up an appointment to meet with them. You always want the property owner to meet with the appraiser because they can talk about their property, what's important to them, and guide them through them what kind of value they see is in the piece of property. So it's very important that they do that.
And the appraiser is independent.
Correct. It's an independent appraiser. It's not somebody. A city could use an appraiser. We have to bid our projects, and you bid out the appraisers. They're very well qualified. They understand partial acquisitions. It's not like appraising a house for a mortgage.
Sure.
It's a completely different type of appraisal.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that, like, hey, these are professionals. They're independent. They're going to come up with the value, and your engagement with them is going to help them do that.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so you want to be part of the process. The property owner should definitely be part of that process.
Yeah.
So they come out, they inspect the property, they ask questions about the property, they do research with the county, the city, whoever, has jurisdiction over the property, what can be done on that property. The appraiser does an analysis of what's called highest and best use. They determine what's the most profitable thing to do with that property, which could mean demoing the house and having just land,
Mhm.
right?
Yep,
You know,
we've done
but
that.
that doesn't mean that that's what the property owner has to do, but that might generate the highest value for that property. So those are the analyses that the appraiser goes through. Once an appraisal's done, then the agency, the city, whoever, reviews that appraisal, agrees with the appraiser, like it contains everything it needs to contain, the analysis was done properly, makes sense. We accept the appraisal. The City of Elk Grove, through the closed session process, because we have to get authority to make offers, the council in Elk Grove makes a determination of just compensation. Yes, we have an appraisal. It determined a value of, round numbers, say $200,000. So the appraisal was $200,000. Um, the city council agrees, just compensation. So that's a determination of just compensation. Somebody has to make that determination. The appraiser doesn't. The appraiser makes a value of fair market analysis, and then the board, whoever has authority, makes the determination of just compensation. It cannot be less than the appraisal.
Okay, yeah,
It could be more,
sure.
but it can't be less.
Yeah, I think you're making a really important point that it's elected representatives, right,
Mhm.
who are doing this, and it's not staff, it's not the appraiser, that you can
Right.
make a recommendation, but at the end of the day, that's the accountability, right?
Correct.
It's
We
like
have to
a
explain what's going on to the elected,
right,
and the elected has to agree that the project, yeah, we need this.
right.
So they're
That's
aware all the way through.
fair, right?
Right.
That's fair.
Right.
Yeah. So,
So then we have what's called just compensation. We make an offer. It's very formal. And that's why meeting with people in person is much better. Because, you know, if you get a stack of paper in the mail or in the email with 20 attachments, do you want to read them? No. Are you going to? Maybe, maybe not. Depends. Um, so that in-person contact to give an offer is very
it's
important.
a human connection.
Right. And to be able to go through this paperwork, to walk through the process. Um, the offer includes the appraisal summary, could include the appraisal, not always. There's regulations when we include them, when we don't, but all the information's there, along with this information brochure. Talks about the process of public acquisitions, Title 6. You have to treat everyone fairly. It gives a very
It's the
it's
law.
outlined. It
Yeah,
gives the law summaries to the
sure.
property owner. So we want to explain all that to the property owners. So we make that presentation to them, ask questions, let them know what's going on, ask them to review everything, ask questions, come back to us. We'll follow up with you. How are you feeling about it? The property owner has the right to negotiate. They have the right to obtain their own appraisal. And they have the right to receive compensation for their own appraisal.
Key.
So,
That is absolutely key.
yes. So they can receive up to $5,000 for their own appraisal. And again, these appraisals aren't your typical mortgage appraisals. That's why they're $5,000 generally or more.
Mm.
I mean, some appraisals can be extremely complicated. If you're bisecting somebody's property, you're taking
Working,
wells,
working
working.
ag, yeah,
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 I mean, appraisals can be extremely complicated.
yeah.
So they can receive up to $5,000 for their own appraisal. They are allowed time to get that appraisal through the process. We negotiate if they get an appraisal. Our appraisal, the two appraisals don't come in at the exact same number. There's probably some sort of difference. So there's negotiations to be had. And so you negotiate it. Hopefully everyone comes out with a mutually acceptable agreement, and you sign deeds, you go through escrow, we get reconveyances, deeds are signed,
Everyone's
And
happy?
everyone's happy. That and it in as good a position as when we started. That's
Yes.
the goal.
That is the goal, and we try to make sure everyone's happy.
We do.
But now we have to talk about what happens when they're not happy with the appraised value,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, what are the options a property owner has when they feel that the value is just not there for them? What's their steps?
Well, to get their own appraisal.
That's step one, sure.
Right. Step 1 is get your own appraisal. And then be honest with yourself. Is that appraisal accurate or
Mhm.
not? You know, I do encourage people to consult an attorney. Eminent domain attorneys, there are some really great eminent domain attorneys out there.
Mm.
And sometimes working with an eminent domain attorney is beneficial because they understand the process. They help guide you through that. I shouldn't say sometimes. It is beneficial,
Mhm.
both sides. And then there's some eminent domain attorneys that maybe promise the world. Um, oh, it's the government, you can get all sorts of money. That's not necessarily the case. I
Sure.
mean, there are laws and regulations that help us make sure that compensation is fair for both the public agency and the private property owner.
Mhm.
Um, i- we, as the population, all pay our taxes and we all pay for public infrastructure projects. And right away is one of those costs of a public infrastructure project. So overcompensating somebody, extremely overcompensating, is not in the public's best interest. And
If the
that's
public funds
r-
comes up, right?
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
damn.
And that's what we don't want to
No.
do. We want to be fair. We don't
Mhm.
want a property owner to be in a worse position. We want them to be in as good a position or slightly better after the project is done and after they're compensated for their project. So, I mean, if we need to, if the two opinions of value are so far different and we cannot reach a negotiated settlement, then you have to file what's called a resolution of necessity. There has to be a public hearing. The property owner's notified of the public hearing for a resolution of necessity. And that's when the governing board, the city council, the county board of supervisors, the JPA board, whoever holds the hearing and determines the necessity of that private property for this project. So it has to be in the public's best interest, has to have the least harm, the greatest good, and it has to be public purpose.
Yeah,
What's the one I missed?
I don't know,
Public
but
purpose, greatest good. Um,
it's
we
just
had to demonstrate the need for the project, that we
yes.
can't reroute the road to avoid the taking
I
of
think
the acquisition of that property.
you're basically describing, like, the exact opposite of 150 years ago, right? It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it is so, um, open and
Mhm.
public, and we're saying out loud, "This is necessary," and it's a public hearing,
Right.
and then a discretionary decision, right? That
Correct.
someone has to vote on it,
Right.
you know? So
So through that open process, the private property owner has the right to speak. Their attorney can speak. And the resolution of necessity is not about money. There is zero discussion about money in the hearing. No discussion whatsoever. It's about, does the is it best served to acquire this private property for the public project?
interesting.
That is what it's about.
Mhm.
There's no zero discussion about money.
Great point.
Money is just what we have to do to compensate you.
Yeah.
So the resolution of necessity is what then is determined. If it passes, then we proceed with, we hope, continued negotiations with the property owner. But if we cannot come to a negotiated settlement, then you file an eminent domain case in the courts. The next step, all this time you can still negotiate, you can still settle.
Right.
There's no,
We want to.
we can avoid
Yeah.
continuing spending lawyer money and everything else. We could settle, but if we can't, then the next step is filing for possession. And you can take possession of the property once we have deposited just compensation with the courts. meaning that determination of just compensation, whatever that amount was, that is what we have to deposit with the courts. The private property owner has the right to take that money. And once the judge gives us possession, they can take the money and we can then have possession of the property. Possession can be anywhere from 30 to 90 days, depends if it's an occupied property or not occupied property.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can build the project. And then if we haven't still settled, then it goes to a jury trial.
Wow.
So a jury is what determines compensation with the
I have
judge.
never done a jury trial. I don't want to, but
I
I
have
mean,
not had to go to a jury trial either. So I have yet to have to do that, but we have had to file resolutions from
sure.
necessities, gone through negotiations, but we tend to settle before we get to a jury trial. But if you can't, that is what you do.
Right. That is, I mean, you just that's it right there. The thing is it probably takes a couple years.
It does. Right-of-way acquisitions. I like to tell the project teams, the best is 6 months is for a right-of-way acquisition from start, meaning I consider the start of the acquisition process when we send a notice of decision to appraise.
Yeah.
That's the start of the process to acquire the property. That process generally takes a minimum of 6 months, and it's just because it takes time. The
Yeah.
appraiser has to appraise the property, council has to determine just compensation, you gotta prepare the offer package, you gotta make the offers, you gotta it's 6 months,
Yeah, I think the
and then
the point is that we're not rushing through this, right?
no.
It's not as you know, on the engineering side, when we prepare schedules, I've always got the right of way in red, right? It's like, okay, how many parcels and what's that process going to take? There is nothing about it that is like, oh, and now we own your property. Like that doesn't
No.
happen. That doesn't happen at all. What you just described in a few minutes takes months,
Mm.
and it's deliberative, it's professional, there's a process. And again, we're trying to do that with trust and open communication.
Absolutely. We show the maps. I have worked to, you know, move the project early on to avoid somebody's I mean, we saved a garage on the side. They didn't want us to take the garage because some agricultural land, we unfortunately had to take the house.
Mhm.
Um, they are keeping their remainder land, and they had a large garage that they wanted to keep on the property. Our original take took that garage, our original acquisition area, and they said, "We really wanna keep that. We wanna be able to store things." It's like, "Alright." So we were able to move the line
Yeah, make
and,
refinements.
refine it so we were able
Yeah.
to avoid it. So they could keep that structure on their property so they could store items for that. But that's part of those negotiations, and without talking to the property owner, you'll never know that.
Sure.
And we, honestly listen. A good right-of-way agent's going to really listen to what the property owner is saying.
So, from my perspective, there's a few things that can be done early on to smooth the process. And the engineer in me is going to say things like boundary surveys,
Mhm,
right? And having really clear title.
mhm.
Um, do you have some tips, some suggestions for the engineering world, the professionals out there, as to what can make your life easier as a
Well, you make
in
a
the
good
right
point.
away phase?
Finding out where utilities are early on is really helpful. Title reports, we obtain those generally early on in the process and reviewing them to find out what recorded rights are there. There could be other rights that are physically on the property that are not recorded, but recorded rights should tell us if there's a public utility easement someplace. And if there are pipelines or something in the project, let's find out what's in those utilities early on and what rights those utility companies need if we're going to move them.
One
Because we don't wanna make 2 offers to the property owner.
mm,
If we need the area right now for the road, and we don't want those utilities there, we have to move those utilities, do they need a separate if they had a right today, they probably want a right. So we need to make sure we
Sure.
acquire that additional right for them.
I'm thinking back to, as you're describing, utilities. When I came out of college, I was doing a job interview, and, the manager was saying he said, like, "Derek, what's the 3 biggest things that will, screw up a project?" And I gave some silly answer, and he goes, "The answer is utilities, utilities, utilities."
Kind of, kind of.
Right? You gotta map them. You gotta know where they're at, and to your point is they have a right,
They
right?
absolutely have a right. Well, they might have a right. They need to be placed someplace. Sometimes they have a right, sometimes they're in what's called road right of way.
Mhm,
That right of way where they don't actually have they're allowed to be there, but they don't have a recorded separate easement. If they have a recorded separate easement, we likely need to put them into another easement. If they're in the road right of way, we could put them back in the road right of way if the project allows that. Or if this project is defining a utility easement for them, we put it there. But,
mhm,
the JPA project's an example of a very large infrastructure project. I work on much smaller ones also, and where maybe we're just doing widening within our existing road right of way for bike lanes. We're
mhm.
refining the roadway and improving it slightly where we're not out there actually acquiring new rights. And so the utility pole that's in our way now just has to relocate 5 feet away because now there's going to be a bike lane there. And it's still in the road right away. So we didn't actually give them any new rights, but we did relocate them in the same right that they had
Sure,
before. So
sure.
it gets complicated.
Can you give us an overall update as to where the city is on Kammerer Road? Can you tell us a little bit about your current status with the right-of-way phase?
We're actually just kicked off the right-of-way phase for the Kammerer Road extension, which is part of the A1
Hmm.
portion of the connector, which is from I-5 to Bruceville Road. The City of Elk Grove is proceeding with right-of-way. We have federal funding on the project for right-of-way acquisitions. We just received our first appraisal back. So we've made our first, we sent our first notice of decision to appraise. The appraisal just came in. November 12th, we'll be going to our city council and asking for just compensation, authority to make the offer. This particular offer, unfortunately, the roadway goes over the top of their house.
Mm.
So this is a full acquisition of the property where we do have to relocate the property owners. Um, Fortunately, the owners have known about this project for years. When we first started the project, they certainly weren't pleased. They wanted to make sure they could stay in the house until their children were in school. Well, guess what? Now their children have children.
Ah.
And
Oh
so
my
they
gosh.
did
Yeah.
stay.
Yes.
But I think they're I don't want to say they're supportive. They're aware, they aren't, they understand the process.
Yeah.
So we're in the process with them. We have not made an offer yet. We will be making an offer, like I said, sometime after November 12th, which is probably the worst time to do it. Um, if possible, I would like to avoid taking somebody's property during the holidays.
Yeah.
It's not a nice time to start this process.
Sure. That makes sense.
Some we don't have the privilege of defining the timeline though. Um,
A lot of our funding is use it or lose it. And
it
that's the
is.
truth, right? Is that we have very strict timelines sometimes on how to use the dollars that are given to us.
Right. So, I mean, timing's terrible,
Mm.
but we will, we are very human. We are working with them. We understand that it's going to take longer. The holidays are here. We don't want to make your holidays unhappy. We're not, they can stay in the house.
Sure.
And the thing right now is the project doesn't have construction funding.
Mhm.
So we're not ready to construct. So there's not an immediate urgency that they have to leave the house, right? So they have plenty of time to um, find a new place to live.
Make adjustments.
Right,
Yeah.
make adjustments. This isn't something that has to happen super quick. And again, it's the compassion of doing it. So we're not
Yeah.
going right away, but we're just starting the right away. We will be making, um, the project is defining. We chose this one first because we knew it was a full acquisition, but we have several other property acquisitions that we will
Yeah.
be taking.
I'm remembering when we had our project on Grant Line in Bradshaw,
Mhm.
and Bradshaw came in at an angle that was skewed, and it really created some safety
Yep.
concerns and challenges. And so we had to realign Bradshaw to a nice, simple 90 degrees. Engineers love 90 degrees.
Yeah.
And so that required a full acquisition and a relocation. And I recall, and maybe you could speak about this, providing relocation assistance,
Yep.
right? In those types of situations where you're saying, yeah, we're taking your home, and it's rare, but it happens.
Does.
What's that relocation assistance process?
It's separate than the acquisition process. They work together, but they are two separate things. So, acquisition, we pay a fair market value, just compensation for the acquisition of the property and the improvements. Well, now we have to make sure that they can be relocated and they can still have a place to live and everything else. There are times when maybe the house, well, it could be an older house on lots of property, right?
Mhm.
And so you have to relocate them to something similar.
Mhm.
So the relocation package then goes through and what we paid for the property. They look like in today's market, what could they acquire? Sometimes there's this difference.
Mhm.
There could be a small delta of $10,000. There could also be a large delta of $100,000, $200,000 difference in finding a new place to live.
Mhm.
And that's called, you know, eh, we're forcing you to move. You need a place to stay. It has to be decent, safe, and sanitary. It has to be all of these things. Has to be somewhat equivalent to what you have. And if it costs more money than what we gave you to acquire your current property, then we have to pay that difference.
Mhm.
And so there's a relocation package. It's a use it or lose it package. So you don't get that delta of let's say it's a big delta. Let's say it's $100,000. You don't get that unless you spend it.
Mhm.
So we're not giving you an extra $100,000 to buy this property because your property was only worth X. But we're gonna give you another $100,000 to ensure that you can get into another property and not be harmed,
Mhm.
right? So that you still have a good place to live. And that's part of the relocation. We also pay to move you. So you do not have to box your own stuff. We will pay for movers to box, unbox, everything. Now, we won't put
Yeah.
it away exactly where you want it, but it's
Yeah.
box and deliver to your new property.
Sure.
So that moving cost, you don't have to pay the moving costs. It's part of your relocation. Um,
From the project management standpoint, this is why we start with the full relocations, because the dollar amounts can vary so much.
Sure.
You need some certainty in your budget, right?
Mhm.
And so that's where it may seem a little strange to go on that first parcel, but it makes total sense to me because it's like, hey, the budget can vary incredibly.
Considerably.
Yeah.
Yeah. We haven't there's a whole housing study that's done. So part of our relocation is the housing studies. The appraisal came in for X amount for this property. The housing study says to buy a comparable house, it's going to cost $100,000 more. I'm just throwing out a number.
Yeah.
Um, and so because it costs 100,000, they could spend up to that amount. Now they may find a house that is only $50,000 more. That's the amount that we pay.
Sure.
It's a you have to spend it to receive it
Sure.
type of package. So we do those comparables so that the property owner is not left in a worse position. As good or slightly better
Right.
is where we aim to get that property owner.
So, I mean, this has been incredibly helpful, and I think that you have given, an expert explanation of this, and I think it's so great. Let's kind of summarize it
Okay.
and say, in your words, I mean, I don't want to put them in your mouth here, but it's like it sounds like we're so fair. This is so far beyond the 19 or the early 1900s, 1800s.
1900 well,
You
yeah,
know,
even the men's. I
I
mean, I
mean,
read some of the stories and I'm like,
yeah.
how could we have done that?"
Just kind of let's. I'll give you the final word here, and right away acquisition led today in the modern world. Kind of give us the final word here.
Um, is a I don't I wanna say it's extremely fair
Mm,
process. It's hard to say that it's fair when it's not you.
sure.
Like, if I came knocking on your door, Derek, would you openly say, "Oh, sure, you can come onto my property and go into my backyard and do a pedestrian survey"? I mean, would you welcome us?
It's hard to accept the government knocking on your door.
Yes. So, I mean, it's hard, but let's be willing to talk to the person that knocks on your door. And if for some reason you don't get along with that person, ask to speak to somebody else. Because I'm sure somebody in the project team you could build a rapport with. And through the process, your rights are protected. You have a fair opportunity to discuss value, to ask for minor revisions to projects, to avoid my tree. I mean, the City of Elk Grove has saved trees for people. We have done project refinements that are personal to that property owner. We really do listen and we want to treat you fairly. There is absolutely nothing about this process that we want to just push you to the side and take your land. Taking is a word that I don't like to use, but I have found during this interview, I have used it several times, but it's more acquiring
Sure.
and compensating you
Yeah.
for it,
Yes.
you know.
Absolutely. Well said. Thank you so
Thank you.
well said. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And
You're
I
welcome.
genuinely appreciate you being here. I think that what we are trying to do is give everyone some insight to the process that it takes to deliver a public works
Mhm.
infrastructure project. Right of way acquisition, real estate, appraisals. This is crucial. It's crucial to our budget, it's crucial to our schedule,
Mhm.
and it's just so important to the good faith with the public,
Yeah.
right? You know?
And we mean it's being fair to the private property owner and being fair to the public in the whole, because we all pay taxes.
Right.
Whatever we're compensating this property owner for is coming through our taxes.
That's right.
You know, it is what our taxes are paying for
Right.
on public projects. So we need to be fair for both sides.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Derek.
All right. Take
All
care.
right. Thanks.